Welcome to what might be 2022's most controversial performance car. It's the new AMG C63 S E-Performance. Quite a name that. And I can't remember another car that's undergone such an enormous personality change. The V8, which has defined the C63 for generations, is gone. And under there is a new 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine supplemented by a plug-in hybrid powertrain. That doesn't only make this car controversial, but also pretty significant. This is the direction a lot of manufacturers are going to be heading in as they try to combine combustion power with high-performance electronics. Question is, has it worked? And does this car still feel like a C63? The noise, the theatre, that's so intrinsic to what a C63 is. Or does this car now feel more like an A45 on steroids? Let's go and find out. Right, today's our first chance to drive the new C63. We are at the beautiful Ascari circuit in Spain. Can't wait to get out there. But before we throw this thing at some corners, I wanted to take a moment to try to understand it and explain some of the powertrain and the chassis complexity going on here, because honestly, it hurts my brain a little bit. So what better place to start than under the bonnet? Pop the bonnet and under there you'll discover basically the same M139 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine as an A45. But you'll discover it's now north-south, not east-west, and the turbocharger is now significantly larger as well. It's also an electric turbo, and the outputs are verging on ridiculous now. So the combustion engine alone produces 350 kilowatts, 545 Newton meters, I think. And when you factor in the electric motor on the rear axle, total system outputs are 500 kilowatts and 1,020 Newton meters. It's getting crazy. Now, the other interesting thing to mention underneath the bonnet here is to make the engine fit and to work from a cooling perspective, Mercedes has actually made the C63 much longer compared to the W206 C-Class upon which it is based. So the overall car is 87 mils longer, the wheelbase has grown as well, and most of that additional length is here ahead of the driver to make the engine fit and work. Now, the way this powertrain deploys all of its performance is actually really interesting, so I'm going to do my best to explain it with some voiceover.
Let's start with the battery and the electronic drive unit. Both are designed and built in-house by AMG, and the way they deploy their performance is quite clever. The 6.1 kilowatt hour battery weighs just 89 kilos, and it's mounted on the rear axle. Although a downside of that is that it does eat into boot space, where you'll find a raised section in the floor. The real genius with the battery is how it's cooled. Each of the 560 cells is individually cooled to maintain a consistent temperature, and that allows the battery to deploy its energy and then recharge again very quickly. The electronic drive unit is equally complex, and it combines an E-motor with a 2-speed gearbox and an electronic limited slip diff. There's another locking diff on the front axle, and while electricity is mostly used to drive the rear wheels, it can be sent to the front if slip is detected. Throw in torque distribution that is fully variable, 4-wheel steering, a drift mode function, multiple stages of braking regen, and 8 drive modes, and it's clear this car is a total rethink of the C63 formula. A final word on the design. Wheels are 19-inch alloys, but Australia is likely to get 20s as standard. The charging plug for the battery is at the back of the car on the passenger side, and if you feel like driving in total silence, AMG claims there is 13 Ks of EV range available from a full battery. As for how much it'll cost, AMG says the new C63 will arrive in Australia from July 2023, and it's tipping a price tag of around $200,000.
Well, this is weird. I'm in a C63. I've pushed the starter button, I'm driving down a pit lane in Spain and the car is completely silent. So straight off the bat, the sensation in here is very different to the current C63. It's one of the tricks up its sleeve of this car that it can be fully electric for 13 Ks. Seriously, the noisiest thing in here is the fan for the aircon. Okay, so what does all of that powertrain and chassis complexity feel like on a circuit? Well, it is bloody fast. Initial impressions are this car is a significant step on compared with the current V8 in terms of just how much speed it can generate and how much speed it can carry. One metric, of course, is 0 to 100 times. The old car, I think, was a sub 4-second car in S-Guise in the coupe, but we could never get anywhere near it when we were doing independent performance testing. It was kind of a mid 4-second car, even in ideal conditions on a drag strip. This car, now that it's all-wheel drive and it's got race start and it's got all of the instant shove from the electronic subsystems, I believe that it is going to be a 3.4-second car. So that is an instant gain in terms of rapid acceleration. It wasn't so long ago that 911 turbos were in that territory, so we have a lot of performance at our disposal here. Man, this circuit is great. We're at Ascari in Spain. This is my first time here. It's basically a private facility. It is really, really fast as well through some sections. Lots of fun, lots of technical turns, lots of chances to explore how this thing changes direction, how it feels under brakes as well, because remember, we've got a lot of weight to contend with now. So I think the official curb weight is 2,145 kilograms, and by any measure, this is a heavy car. It's about, let's say more than 250 kilograms heavier than the current car. I'll throw the exact number up on screen right now. When we start to really get the car closer to the limit, I'll come back to that point, but initially at least, it doesn't feel like a 2,200 kilogram car with me on board. The ride comfort is a big improvement compared to the previous car. The previous car was pretty steely-eyed and very firm. They did improve it with the facelifted car. This car though, straight off the bat, feels a lot more compliant. We've got some pretty fancy damping happening. I think it's the same adaptive damping system that you get in the AMG GT Black series, so it is a very advanced piece of suspension tech. The trade-off is that you get a car that is more comfortable more of the time. So in comfort mode, when we were cruising from the hotel to the circuit earlier, this car didn't really feel like a C63 to me. It felt like a fancy C-Class. So you had none of the oral theatre, we'll get to the sound in a minute, of a normal C63. We were in EV mode for a while. Driving on the freeway around town, it was very supple, very composed, very comfortable. None of the usual C63 trademarks to know that you are in a very focused performance sedan. The sound, let's talk about the sound. We're in race mode now. I had imagined that this car was going to sound like an even angrier A45. And anyone who's driven an A45 will know that that thing is already extremely angry. It sounds like a bucket of bees that's been belted by a hammer. But this car, I don't think it is as angry. It doesn't sound as loud as an A45. It's more like an A45 that's gone to finishing school. It's got a cultured edge to it. I'm a little bit disappointed in that. That's full noise in race mode. That's as angry as the exhaust gets. Well, when I say exhaust, I mean all of the fake noise that's being plumbed into the cabin. For me, that misses the mark in terms of the expectation of a C63 badge. Could be louder, could be angrier. And that's so intrinsic to the C63's appeal, right? The V8, when you put it on idle, you go push the starter button and it's like, whoa. At idle, it sounds mean, menacing, sounds like it's gurgling petrol. You don't get any of that in this new car. It is a completely different focus, different design altogether, different ballpark. Oh, big braking zone. The brakes are excellent. Turn-in is pretty responsive and sharp as well. Yeah, this thing's fun. We're on road tyres here. You can feel the car starting to push a little bit, but So Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, great tyre. They're holding up really surprisingly well, given the abuse that these cars have got with journos being through them all day. So out of there I gave an absolute full throttle, and you can feel the instant response from the electric powertrain. Oh, this is fast. Oh yeah. Love that brake pedal. You can really delve into the travel. There's lots of modulation. It gives you a lot of confidence. Oh, it rides those curbs so well as well. Right, weight. I mentioned it earlier. My initial thought holds. This thing hides its weight extremely well. It's responsive, it changes direction really sharply. This is my favorite section, big brakes. 190 k's down to 110. The way it rides those bumps is very impressive. So yeah, like I said, they have got a really good car here. The question is it a C63? Because that car, no matter how Mercedes tries to spin it, that car has certain things that you expect from that nameplate. Verdict's still out on that one for me. I want to spend a bit more time in this car, take it for a drive on the road where it's going to spend most of its time before I can give you a verdict on that. But in isolation, without all of the expectation of a C63 badge, it's very impressive. Perhaps the biggest compliment I can pay this car is that it doesn't feel ridiculously complex to drive. It feels very intuitive, very natural, like any other performance car, kind of like a really fast, hot hatch. And given the amount of complexity, four-wheel steering, hybrid system on the rear axle, 350 kilowatt, 4-cylinder turbo with an electric turbo, the software in this car is deeply impressive. Trying to juggle all of those systems based on all the parameters that you need on a circuit. Well done, AMG. As a tech tour de force, very impressive.
Inside, the C63 looks and feels like a regular W206 C-Class, with some notable additions. The steering wheel design is unique, as are the front bucket seats, which are hugely comfortable and supportive. The seating position itself is excellent, and the level of connectivity and tech on offer via that huge central touchscreen is seriously impressive.
Now, one of the cool functions I wanted to show you inside the car is the number of new AMG specific displays and apps and telemetry. The screens in here are really impressive. So you've got this massive central screen, a digital dial cluster, and also a huge head-up display. And there's also a new Super Sport theme for the display as well. It looks really cool, gives you heaps of really useful information. The head-up display is enormous. It's very impressive. The other thing that's really impressive is the amount of data and telemetry available through the center console. So we've got AMG Performance as a menu, which allows you to see how the drive and how the systems are deploying the performance the car has. Perhaps the coolest new function though is actually a new element of the AMG Track Pace menu. Now this is basically AMG's track-based telemetry. So it gives you sector times. There's a whole load of circuits already preloaded into the car, which is pretty cool. What the C63 does though is it adds in a boost management system. So it actually knows where best on the circuit to deploy its maximum performance, and it gives you a little warning and a flash here on the dash, and you just push through the détente in the throttle, and that gives you the maximum performance to extract the most lap time out of the car. Now that's pretty cool. So does it feel like a C63? Not if your gauge of what a C63 should be is based on the current V8 model. This car is something else entirely. It's phenomenally fast, fiendishly complex, and it does make the current V8 C63 feel a little old school, perhaps a touch quaint. Now you might see that as a good thing or as a bad thing, but there's no denying that AMG has thrown its entire bag of tricks at this new model. At the beginning of this video, I asked if this is going to feel like an A45 on steroids. Well, actually, it's more like an A45 with a jetpack or an Iron Man suit. Whether that's enough for the hordes of fans for the current C63 out there, I'm not so sure. Let me know in the comments.